Today's topic, hey, there you go, Johnny.
Mhm.
It's going to be seller lead generation. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with free lead generation techniques and strategies, or low cost seller lead generation strategies. And then we're going to go into paid stuff. Okay. Because this is just such a timely thing that we really have to work on. Most markets that we coach and train in, people are in an exceptional seller's market, and there's either low or no inventory. And Brian, I talk to people where one seller is worth probably 15 to 20 qualified buyers at this point in some markets.
Yeah, it really is true. I was talking to somebody this morning. This is an insane number. 48 offers submitted, and I'm talking about 48 different properties. 48 offers submitted, 2 accepted.
That's just rough. That's just unsustainable. So what that means is we either sit around and don't sell real estate and keep paying our expenses, or we find some listings to sell to these buyers who need houses to buy, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
yeah, so let's talk about that. Because right now, in a lot of markets, I need another buyer lead, like I need another hole in my head. Um, so let's talk about some free seller lead gen stuff.
Okay.
Um, one of the unfortunate things is when you get to a market like this. I mean, I got started in the business, and made a living for a long time working expireds and for sale by owners primarily, and for rent by owners, right? Working that crowd and finding out if they want to sell property. And we'll explain for people who don't know that, but right now there are no expired. Most markets, if it's a seller's market, there's no expireds. Or the FISBOs sell so quickly that they don't even get time to come to their senses and realize that they need a real estate agent.
Because apparently some of them don't. And I want to be the real estate agent who says this, because I like to be different. They don't necessarily need us, guys. There are people who are very competent who can, in this market, sell a house. So, step one, when you're approaching those people, don't tell them that they need you, because it's not true necessarily. Now, there's some expertise that we can bring with contracts and market knowledge and things like that. But to technically sell your house, you really don't need an agent, probably less than ever right now. Now, that's going to shift. We know that's going to shift, but just let's just call it what it is, instead of just trying to, I think a lot of, everyone should use an agent. I don't know that I agree with that, and I wish everybody would, but it's not something that's actually required. I think if you go in with a mentality that they don't need me, maybe you can just offer them some value instead of telling them why you need, like the script that we used to have. Well, it's 6% commission, and traditionally across the country, FISBO sells 7% less than that was the idea. By hiring me and paying me 6%, you're going to make 1% more money than you would doing all this stuff yourself. That's a pretty typical script that's been used with FISBOs over the year. I don't believe that's true right now. And I don't know about you, but the last thing I want to do is BS somebody, because again, we're in this for the long term. And what I mean by that is, if I go and give somebody some BS scripts that aren't true, maybe I'll get a listing here or there. But at the end of the day, that's not good for me long term. And we got to be thinking long term, especially in this market, because when this thing turns, we've got to be the people who are there for when this thing turns. And it will. It's going to turn somewhere between 90 and 180 days, in my opinion. That's just my opinion, by the way.
As my mother-in-law says, from your mouth to God's ears. Let's hope that happens. Good. Yeah. So agreed, right? No, people don't need us to sell houses. People honestly have never needed us to sell houses. And there are still markets like areas of like Wisconsin and some of the Midwestern states where there's actually areas that don't use real estate agents that much, where it's more of a culture of for sale by owner stuff. And so, no, you don't need us to sell your house. And when I'm prospecting for sell by owners, or even expireds who are thinking about going for sell by owner, that's something that I'm honest about, right? Listen,
Yeah.
I can do my own taxes and I can tile my own bathroom floor, but you know what? I hire professionals to do it, and it always comes out better and less headaches. And I get, there are advantages to doing that. Can I go to Home Depot and buy the material and watch the YouTube videos? I sure can. Do I want a really good tile job in my bathroom? I sure do. So I don't do it myself, right?
Amen.
Yeah. So no, they don't need us. And now, the point is that these free or sort of free sources are kind of dried up at this point in a lot of markets, and it's tough. So you can't just rely on that. So I
Yeah.
mentioned the for rent by owners. Have you ever worked those, Brian?
I haven't, but I've talked to people who have, so I don't have any personal experience with it, but I've heard good things about it actually.
Yeah, so, again, what you're looking for is you have to filter out the institutional investors, the ones that have, the very large apartment buildings that are advertising units for sale. Really, what you're looking for are those individual property owners, the mom and pop landlords, the do-it-yourselfer guys. And really, you're just reaching out to them, finding out if they'd be interested in dumping the property, getting out of it, being done with having tenants and toilets and roofs and all that stuff that they have to take care of, and if they're ready to cash out and move on, whether they would consider that option or not. And for you people that are just average, say, regular real estate salespeople, it can be enough to ask, hey, have you thought about selling that investment property? If you're a little more savvy in the investment world, you could potentially present it to this do-it-yourself landlord or mom and pop landlord as, hey, you could turn your investment property basically into an annuity if you hold paper on that. If you sell it with seller financing, if you have room, basically you no longer have to take care of that property. The new owner pays you as a mortgage every single month. You get interest on it, and you no longer have to take care of the roofs or the toilets. Is that something that you have thought about? Right? So that's a way to position it when you're talking to those. So how do you find them? Basically, the low tech way is you go to places like Hot Pads, Craigslist, and you just look through the listings and you reach out to them, ask them if they would consider selling it. It's not, it's just another source of property owners who may or may not consider selling. It's a little bit better than circle prospecting.
Well, and
Uh,
here's the thing too. So there's an easy button on that. It costs a little bit of money, not much. I can't remember if we had Red X on here or I just interviewed them
oh
for
yeah.
Rap Goats. So we had
Nope.
Red X on here. Okay, I thought we
Yep.
did, but I've slept a couple times since then. So Red X, which is relatively inexpensive. I don't even remember what it costs off the top of my head. I should probably know that, but I don't know off the top of my head. Less than $150 a month. But they will give you for rent by owners. And here's the other thing I want people to think about. Yes, we want right now business, but here's the best thing. How we're working on is right now business and in the future business. So don't get discouraged by that person that says, no, I'm going to keep it. I've got a renter in there for the next 5 months, blah, blah, blah. Perfect. Set that person up to say follow up in 4 months. Hey, how's that renter going? Did you happen to find backfill one? And you know what? Offer to place one too, because realistically, you could probably place a renter pretty easy in something like
Oh
that.
yeah. Yep.
So, it's all about providing value, and yes, we want short-term solutions, and for rent by owners, if you call enough of them, some of them will rent, some of them will want to sell. They've just had enough of it, and that's the concept, and that's what Curtis, who was on here with the Red X, but eventually you call enough of these people and some are like, man, I hate being a landlord. And here's the thing, I hated being a landlord. Like, I vowed that I would never manage my own property again, and I won't, because I hated it. I hated that guy who called me up and said, hey Brian, yesterday this happened, my dog died and my car broke and I can't pay rent on the first. Can I pay on the 12th? I was the guy who said, sure, because I was a horrible landlord from that perspective. From a business perspective, I was a horrible landlord. I was a nice guy and they didn't dislike me. But my point is that a lot of people like me get fed up with that conversation. I got into the
Oh
rental
yeah.
business. I was excited about it. I was going to make tons of money. And I still think it's a good business. But at the end of the day, it's a frustrating business if you don't have somebody managing that property for you.
It can be annoying, believe me. I have some rental units myself, and I know the good and the bad. Yeah, so let's point that out. When we talk about free, you want to leverage a very simple tool like RedX, right? It has a dialer, it pulls the data for you, will pull expireds, will pull for sale by owners, or something like Vulcan 7. I don't know if Vulcan 7 offers for rent by owners.
They don't.
Okay, back when I was doing it, I actually had to go and find a programmer to write a custom script to scrape Craigslist for me every day and dump it into an Excel spreadsheet.
Nice.
Don't tell Craigslist that. But so now I'm glad to hear that you can actually buy that data,
Yeah.
inside one of these providers.
And it's relatively inexpensive. So that's a great source for rent by owners, is a good one. Here's
Yep.
another source. We can kind of back and forth things. Old expireds. I love old expireds.
Oh
And here's what I
yeah,
mean. I'm
absolutely.
not talking about 6 months ago. I'm not even talking about 12 months ago. I'm talking 24 to 48 months ago. In other words, 2 to 4 years ago. And here's why. We get caught in our own world, right? My world, your world is real estate in different versions, between coaching and teams and all that kind of stuff. We live in this stuff all day long. I bet you if you pulled 100 people off the street right now and said, what are the interest rates right now? 30 or 40 of them would probably know, but there's 60 or 70 who don't.
Right.
Or if you pulled 100 people and say, hey, what do you think has happened to your value of your house in the last 5 years, percentage wise? Like, do you think it's gone up 1%, 5%, 10%? Do you think it's gone down? Most people don't
A
know
lot
the
of
answer
people,
to that
I don't
question.
know.
Right. So
I
what's my
think
point
it's
of that?
up. I have no idea by how
Right.
much.
I hear the housing market is hot. I was watching the news yesterday and they were mentioning something about that. But here's what they didn't necessarily do. And this is a unique opportunity more than it's ever been, in my opinion. So, we look at, some of the booms that happened like 05, 06, 07. Those were big booms. This is the biggest market upswing that I've seen in 20 years. And I don't know about you, but that's been my experience. So a guy who listed his house for $300,000 in 2016 and it didn't sell. I bet I'm just wagging this that guy could probably turn around and sell his house for between 375 and 400 today, and he couldn't even sell it for 300 back then. So here's the great thing about this. First of all, no one else is calling these people, right? They're not getting bombarded. They're not like new expireds who get 50 phone
No.
calls a day.
You might have one other person in your market, two if it's a giant market, who are calling old expireds.
Right. And so here's a conversation. If I get you on the phone, hey, Dale, it's Brian, just reaching out to some people who had their house on the market in 2016 or 2017, whichever group you're calling through. And, I noticed that you had it on there for 300,000. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like it's sold. Our market is crazy right now. So I did a quick CMA just off the top of my head. Obviously, I haven't been to your house, and I think your house is worth between 375 and 400. Are you interested in selling? Holy crap, I didn't know my house was worth that much money. And some people just know I'm good or whatever. But here's what won't happen. You're the 27th agent who's called me today. Leave me alone, because you're not. So
Right.
if you're an expired person who's banging through expireds, God bless you. This is a much easier phone call. And by the way, it's also really, people are excited to hear that. I mean, a lot of people don't even know what their house is worth. You know, I'm a
Yeah.
real estate agent, and about 6 months ago, I said, "Hey, I wonder what my house is worth," because I don't think about my own house, and so I got to feel like most people don't. And huge
Yeah.
opportunity on old expireds.
Yeah. So we have a question here from Johnny. My last one had 12 offers, went 250K over asking. He's in Canada. He's in Ontario, right?
Okay, got it.
250K over asking. Shortage of supplies obvious. How do you inspire homeowners to sell when we're in a lockdown? They're in a lockdown up there, by the way, right now for like I think they did it for a month. Besides the astronomical sale price they could get. So, Johnny, here's the sad news. You can't get somebody to sell their house, usually even for lots of money, if they don't have some other reason to sell. That is, I've almost never seen anybody decide to sell their primary residence with no other reason to do so other than to get money for it, right? Unless they had bad gambling
Unless they
debts or
have,
something.
well, yeah, unless they have money problems, right?
Unless they have money problems, exactly. If they
So
don't have money problems, a big bag of money isn't necessarily going to cause them to uproot how they live and their environment in order to go and do something else. So here's what I'll say. You get into the conversation by waving around the potential of a bag of money, but you have to look for another reason that they would do it to achieve something or to get something or to avoid something or to move on to something, right? Some other plan around it. So when you ask, how do I get homeowners to sell? Besides the astronomical price, they have to be internally motivated for some other reason, and you can't manufacture it really. So then what you do at that point is, if they have no other reason, if they have no other consideration other than because there's a big pile of money and they aren't making a decision to move forward, they probably won't now. So get them to future pace them. Got it. So when do you think you would downsize, upgrade, move across town, do whatever, right? Go to a condo, whatever it is. Future pace, find out what they'll be doing and when they'll be doing it. Then you add them to your system and you nurture them over time for future business, like Brian was talking about.
Yeah, and if the objection is lockdown, I'm not sure know how to overcome it. Like, what do you do with that? And I think the biggest problem with some homeowners when they're in lockdown is, great, you sell my house for 250 grand more than I thought it was worth. Where do I live? Because I can't live in my pile of money. That's hard.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
you're going to have to come up with some kind of solution for them as well. So, one of the things you might take a look at is what the rental market looks like. Because here's the thing, I'll disagree with you a little bit just for fun, because we like to do that on here. But if you give me, my house is worth about 350. If you gave me $600,000 for my house today, I'd find some place to go. And I'm
Okay.
not trying to be smart, but I
Fair
mean,
enough.
would I go live in an apartment for 6 months to have an extra 250 grand? Yeah, I probably would, because
All
I can
right.
look at this and
I
say,
like that.
okay, this market is eventually going to open up. As long as I have a place to live, would I put up with the inconvenience of moving, with the inconvenience of, you know, not having that perfect house for 6 months? Yeah, I would. Now, you got to understand this too. I don't have any kids living with me. I wouldn't do that with a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a
Yeah,
16-year-old.
I'm thinking about it. I have two kids, and I could get maybe 200K more than I paid for this house right now, and I don't think I would go through it for that.
Right. Well, and I didn't say 200K more than I paid. I said 200K more than it was worth, because
Oh,
I'm going to
got it.
guess that person listed that house. And again, I don't know what the price point was. We didn't just go there, but they listed that house for what they thought it was worth.
Oh
And
yeah.
so if I think my house is worth 600 and you offer me 850, we're having a different conversation. But
You're gonna find an apartment.
I'm going to find an apartment, because that's just like someone writing me a check for $250,000. Well, I like $250,000, so I might find a way to get around that. So if that's something that's really happening, you might take a look at that. But again, you've got to give them. I don't care, for how much money you got. I'm not going to live in the street. So you've got to give them a
Right.
solution about where they can go. And even if that's renting, and the pitch looks like this, man, why don't you rent for a year? The market will slow down, and then you can, you won't be locked down anymore. And then you can use that equity that you got to go out and buy something new. And again, is that perfect? I don't know. What are interest rates going to do? There's a lot of moving parts there, but you got to offer ideas to people and say, hey, I had a client who did this, or I had somebody who suggested this is an option. By the way, I looked at these apartment complexes. They have 3 to 4 bedroom apartments, and they're going for $2,000 a month, and they're pretty nice and might be a great place to live for 6 months until lockdown's over. So, because I'm guessing that because they're in lockdown, you're getting an economic, the supply and demand economic model is on steroids right now, is my guess. And so
Yeah.
someone says, I
It's
want to buy a house, I'm going to buy something, and clearly somebody's willing to pay over 250 grand for a house. So
yeah.
that's
Yeah. So let's finish talking about the you're welcome, Johnny. You said that was awesome advice. Let's finish with the free stuff. So, obviously, expireds if you have them, old expireds for sale by owners, rent by owners, and then we've got probates, right? People who have passed away there. And I don't know about how this works in Canada, but in most states in the US, if someone dies and owns real estate, their home typically will go to probate for the will to be probated, like what happens with that piece of property. There's still foreclosures. There's always foreclosures happening, tax sales, things like that, right? Where people are going to potentially lose their home. Those are all opportunities there. And then there's the old standby, which is circle prospecting into farm areas or all the homes in an area where you serve, and just calling them up and finding out if they've considered selling. Door knocking. This crazy concept from the 1960s called door knocking still actually works today. I know
And
of
be careful
various,
with that. And just
yeah,
FYI, there are markets that's not good in. So understand
no,
your market if you're going to door knock.
absolutely. And are you saying, Brian, from coronavirus perspective or because
Yeah,
of
I spoke to an
gated
agent in California.
communities or?
Yeah, with gated communities, but I spoke to an agent in California the other day, and they're like, "Yeah, we're not even doing open houses. So if
No,
you're not doing open houses in your market, don't door knock in your market, because
don't do it.
that's, I mean, yeah, because an open house, at least people are coming to you. Door knocking, because I can tell you right now, in where I was at 6 months ago, if someone would have knocked on my door, I'd have been pissed. Just between you and I, because that's my feeling. Now I can put 100 people in a room and get 100 different opinions on that, but be respectful of your local ordinance. If you live in Canada, don't go door knocking because it's locked
Right.
down apparently.
If you live in Texas or Florida, go for it. Get
Right.
out there and door knock.
Amen.
Bring them some cookies. Yeah. Baked goods. So those are all the free things. Let's talk about some paid stuff, right? So
Okay.
there's going to be, and we have about 4 minutes left. Paid stuff, okay? The real standard internet lead generation for sellers is a home valuation, right? Some variation. Are you guys running that at all in your market?
Yeah. So we had Street Text on last week. We use Street Text, and
Street
Street Text
text.
runs home vals. And what's great about them is, you guys, real quick, is they do basically not A/B tests. They're doing, I can't remember, split test. So basically, you're running 3 ads simultaneously. Whichever one performs the highest, we turn the other 2 off and keep banging the other one to get those. And understand, anytime you're doing internet lead generation, no matter buyers or sellers, it's a grind. And so you're going to get 100 leads, and realistically, on the sell side, you're going to get 1 or maybe 2 of those to convert in 6 months. So it's still a good lead source, and if you look at the ROI, it's still really good. But understand what you're getting there.
Yeah. So there are Street Text was on, super nice guys. They really know their business. They're Canadians. For our Canadian viewers, you should, keep the money in-house. Go talk to Street Text if you want to do some home valuations. There are other companies like Bold Leads. I
And a
can't
lot
even
of
think of all the names,
Yeah,
but
well, a lot of the Commissions Inc. I think Boomtown does a lot of the platforms that you already have in place. You can run seller home vals off of those too. It's really
yes,
easy to do. So if you have a front facing website with a CRM, Commissions Inc., Boomtown, Chime, any of
Real
those type,
Geeks,
Real Geeks,
FirePoint.
PowerPoint, they all have that. So some of you may have it and not even be thinking about it, but I love Street Text, to be honest with you, because of the fact that they have that split testing option, and basically they create the ads for you. But if you don't want to spend the $300 a month that approximately Street Text costs, you probably have the ability to do it already on your own.
Yep, good. So that's a pretty standard one in terms of buying seller leads. There are, and now, so Brian, there are also, I believe, does Zillow do seller leads? I don't
They
remember.
do indirectly, so you have to buy buyer leads to get their seller leads. So you
Okay.
can't just go to Zillow and say, "Hey, I'd like to have seller leads." There's a percentage, and basically all they're really doing is they run the same ads. And some people say I'm a seller, some people say I'm a buyer, and the majority of them are going to be buyers. So it's
Yeah.
not a separate lead source per se. So here's one that is actually pretty decent. ZBuyer. I don't know if you guys know ZBuyer or not, but it's relatively inexpensive. So, if you
I used
close
them a
one
long
trend,
time ago.
yeah, I still use them. Their model has changed over the years, and the lead quality ebbs and flows. But I think I pay $279 a month. So if I get one closing a year, I break even. So it's a pretty inexpensive lead source. And here's another thing that we started doing with them. I know we're talking about listings, but this is also a different thing. Think about this. If you get a Z buyer lead, basically what a Z buyer lead is, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's someone who's looking for a cash offer on their house. So, we would go through and say, "Hey, we can give you a cash offer." And then we'd say, "Your house is worth 300, we'll offer 220." And they're like, "Why would you do that?" "Well, we can, our investor needs to make money." We go through that whole process. But here's the thing that we're doing with those people also now. "Hey, Z buyer guy, I've got 6 people who are interested in your house." Because go understand what you have. And we didn't have this before. Like 5 years ago, I didn't have a list of 10 people who wanted to buy this one house. I've
10
got that.
qualified buyers who can't buy anything else, who are about to build their own mud hut.
Yes. So there is, the idea that I want to list a house, but there's also the idea that I want to sell a house. And
Right.
so putting those two things together, and think about this. If I bring you a buyer and I say, "Look, I charge 6%. Or charge 5%, give them a discount because you're working the buyer and seller. But I've got 7 people who are interested in your house, and I can literally bring 7 people over the next 48 hours. Are you interested?" Well, that's a
And
heck of a lot different.
what you do is you ask, how much do you want for your house?
Mhm.
Because 9 times out of 10, they're not going to know that whatever that number is they say, I'm pretty confident I can get you, depending on market, 20, 30, $40,000 more than that. And here's the easy thing. Hey, Brian, how much do you want for your house? Let's role play this.
250,000.
250,000. You know what? I think I might be able to get that done. Brian, if I can get you 250,000 or more, would you be willing to pay me 6% to bring multiple buyers and have them compete against each other for you?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right.
That's great. And
Fantastic.
here's another thing that people might do. They might talk about net. So if I can net you $250,000, by the way,
In
my
your
my
pocket.
yeah, my commission is 6%, and that 250,000 includes title fees, closing costs, my commission, all of that stuff. Is that something? If you really want to just break it down, so we're not necessarily talking about commission, you're talking about net to seller, and that's an option, because if someone says they want $250,000, I don't know that they care about the purchase price. I think they want $250,000. Wouldn't you
Right.
agree?
Yes.
And
So
so
that's a really good source there. So any other paid seller sources that you can think of before we move on to?
Fast Home Offer is one other one. And Fast Home Offer basically is similar to Z Buyer, but they're bid leads. So I don't know what the bid, they bid differently in different markets. And generally speaking, they're investors who use Fast Home Offer. But we used to buy Fast Home Offer leads until they got too expensive in my market. And honestly, I might have to go back as I sit and have this conversation. But they go out there and say, okay, we've got Bob and he wants $200,000 for his house, and you call Bob and say, hey, and we would list probably 3 to 4 out of 10 of those. But when the lead got to be $400,
Ooh,
I mean, and they're expensive, but at the same point in time, figure out your ROI, figure out your conversion rate. So if I was converting 4 of those, even at $4,000, that's $1,000 a listing. That still works. Now, if I get much higher than that, then my ROI gets out of whack. But Fast
yep.
Home offers a good lead source as well.
Okay, good. So then I was going to move on to not necessarily where I buy a lead, but just some strategies around advertising for sellers. And that can be passive advertising, such as you messaging your existing database, your sphere of influence, people in your phone, putting posts onto social media, and not just, hey, who do you know that wants to sell? Or the market is high, send me anybody who wants to sell their home. Or do you want to know what your house is worth? But do more posts and messages around specific seller personas, right? So, Brian's a sphere of influence in my phone. I hit Brian up. Hey, man, how are you and the wife doing? It's been a while. Listen, I've got so many buyers right now who are looking for that home where somebody's looking to downsize. They're looking for that big family home. Do you happen to know anybody who's considering downsizing, or empty nesters who are thinking about moving on? Right. So when I'm asking Brian to think into his group of people that he knows, to pick me out specific people that might work better, because you're going to have a better shot of Brian identifying somebody and either telling you now or later on down the road, him answering that and giving you that lead, versus me just saying, hey, Brian, prices are way up. Do you know anybody who wants to sell their house? Right. That's
Absolutely.
just too easy. And people don't really they don't go into their contacts looking for that.
Well, and here's something that's interesting too. So anybody who you sold a house to in the last 12 months, traditionally this technique stopped working 6 days ago, but because of the delay of COVID, it still works now. So remember the law of reciprocity. I don't want to just call up Dale and say, hey, Dale, you're my friend. I like you. Send me somebody. The script's not quite that bad, but how about
Right.
this? Hey guys, the taxes got deferred until May 17th this year. And I apologize that I didn't send this out earlier, but I emailed you over a settlement statement in case you didn't remember where that was. I know when you move, sometimes stuff gets lost. So make sure that you talk to your accountant about that. Now we're having a conversation. I just gave you something. By the way, how are you liking the house? Oh, it's great. I love it. Blah, 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 blah. Out of curiosity, and it's not why I called, but is there any chance you happen to know anybody else who's looking to sell? I've got a list of probably 25 buyers who cannot find a house because the inventory is so crazy right now. So if you happen to know anybody, that would be amazing. But give them something. And it doesn't have to be that, but you can always find something to give somebody. Hey, I just sent you a 1-year anniversary gift, because it's your 1-year anniversary. Make a good, legitimate reason to call somebody, and then, law of reciprocity, let them kick back to you.
Yeah, So doing those kind of personal outreaches, right? That would be, I mean, that, whether it's paid, whether you're running ads yourself, whether you're using one of these services like Street Text or other ones to get in front of potential sellers with that messaging, or if you're just working your sphere or using your social media contacts or your database to message them and have these conversations, you need to be talking seller, talking seller, talking seller, talking seller in lots of different areas. And that's, I don't know, Brian, is that about it? Any other seller lead gen methods you can think of?
No, there's Google LSA. That's the newest, greatest thing. What we're finding with Google, and Google LSA stands for local service ads, for those of you who aren't familiar with it. And that is an effective lead source. The problem that we found with it, unfortunately, is it works significantly better in big markets than it does in small markets. And I'm not one of those people who says it's market dependent on a lot of things, but because of the amount of traffic you get, it works much better in bigger markets because there's just more traffic. So but Google Local Services, if you haven't set that up, is a pretty good lead source.
And we don't know whether that's operating in Canada yet, right?
I don't. I'll be honest. I don't.
It is
Talk.
operating in the US in all the
Sure.
markets, but we don't know about Canada at this point.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
good.
then I'll say this: be subtle. There's always immediate business that you can call and bang through the phone for, but guys, even now, start thinking long term. So I love what Dale was talking about with retargeting people and start giving value. And video is everything in 2021. I can't say that enough times. Make videos that have value. One of the things that I would tell somebody if I was coaching them as a single agent who was trying to get listings is do one value add video a week and retarget it,
Yep.
because that in and of itself it will make you an expert. And it's amazing how much people love video and how much they want to watch it. So that's the that's a magic bullet. Unfortunately, it's not a short-term magic bullet.
No, it's not. Um, you know what? Actually, there is one more that I forgot that I wanted to mention. There are, if we're talking about mailers, so right, mailers to a farm. And this is one of those old school techniques that still works if you do it consistently over time and you have a good message. And it's also dependent on the amount of competition that you have in your market. So doing postcards, and there's companies like Remine and RSP Pro that will do
AM cards also.
AM cards that will do predictive analytics, right? So what they're doing is they're comparing the LSA is available, but no real estate category for Canada. You Canadians just screw that. I don't know how you guys mess that up. Tell them
I
to put
keep
in the real
watching it.
estate
Be
category.
first. Eventually
Yeah,
it'll reopen. Eventually it'll open.
eventually. Yeah, you need to just sit outside Google's doors asking them when Canada gets the real estate category. Um, So predictive analytics, they take your MLS, they compare it with market data, with statistics and ownership things. They blend that together, give you a list of people who they believe are likely to be selling in the near future, and you target them with a mailing campaign. That's the concept there.
Mhm.
But just like if you're going to plant an orchard, don't expect to start bearing crops this year. Do you know what I mean? It's going to take a while.
Yeah, and you might get enough short-term ROI to break even, but long-term the ROI is great. Short-term the ROI sucks. Like
Yeah,
if you're going to mail a list once, don't mail it.
no.
If you're not going to mail a list a minimum of 6 times, don't mail it. That's the math. And 6 is the absolute bare minimum. I did have one other thing that I remember as you brought up mailing. Here's a great lead source, and it's a little. Make sure you're not a jerk. And I know that sounds like a funny thing to say, but 61% of all people who get divorced sell their house within 12 months.
Mm,
Divorce data is very, very strong data. And it's funny, when I first heard that, I'm like, well, I don't want to be that guy who's preying on those people. So don't be the guy who's preying on those people. Be the guy who's understanding, be the person who can be there and help those people through a rough time, because as someone who's been through that, it's not any fun. But at the end of the day, someone coming in and helping me make it through that, if you have that personality, if you're that nurturer, that person who can come in and help and be understanding and navigate a divorce, because like we've got one right now, not that we got it through this, but the husband and wife literally can't be in the same room together. Like
Ugh,
we scheduled closing and we scheduled it at 2 different times, so they can't even be in the same room. So
wow.
if you're a person who understands that and can handle that, it's a great lead source.
Yep. Good. All right. Everybody, thanks for joining us today. We're going to try to see if we can coordinate a bigger webinar with lab code agents to see if we can talk more about seller lead generation, because it's such an important topic right now. And I think that a lot of teams out there don't have this dialed in well. I would say that there are many, many more buyer-heavy, buyer-based teams than there are listing-based teams out there, in my experience.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
because I can just go out and buy leads. That's not hard.
right. You can buy a 12-pack of buyers right now, but you can't. It's hard to get sellers. So,
Absolutely.
Brian, thanks for joining me. Good seeing everybody. Have a great week.
Thanks, everybody.